Good afternoon. Welcome to the Small Business Briefing. I'm Brian Kelly, the CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Miller, Vice President of Communications at SBAM. We appreciate you tuning in today. I do want to welcome one of our newest premium members, TAG Multimedia. They are a full-service advertising and marketing agency specializing in customized digital services. So welcome to TAG and all of our other members who have joined recently. All right, Brian, we have kind of I think, a data-heavy report today. Let's start off with the September unemployment update. It had been ticking up in recent months. Is that continuing?
So for Michigan specific, it had been kind of inching its way up. It actually stayed the same. So unchanged 4.5% unemployment, which is for modern times is a pretty on the good side in terms of unemployment over the rate of 5 is when people start really describing it as high. It had been down actually lower than the national rate for a while. It started inching up, but seems to have kind of leveled off at 4.5%. Workforce numbers stayed the same over the year or over the month. So actually, this is one of those months where you've heard me saying before that sometimes unemployment goes up for good reasons, or it might go down, but for bad reasons, depending on what's happening with the size of the workforce getting bigger or smaller. But in this case, workforce stayed the same. And so it stayed the same. And then the total unemployed stayed the same. There's some puts and takes to that, but just a level number. The federal rate is at 4.1. So it's about, does it work out to like 9% or so overall, less, but kind of in the same type of a range. So a overall pretty boring report this month.
All right. So KPMG has published an index showing the cost of the childcare shortage. Obviously, we have covered, well, kind of this childcare crisis that we're in here. So what does this shortage costing workers and businesses?
Yeah, what was published was a national number. So keep in mind these are national numbers we're talking about, not in Michigan. But I would say that I would expect that in Michigan it's proportionately would be very similar to the national numbers, or maybe even a little worse in terms of the shortage faced in the for childcare. So they measured according to missing hours of work, which of course has a productivity impact on the business, but this is really kind of a worker side analysis. And so there's an estimated of 1.2 to 1.5 million workers, largely women, either have to shorten their working hours or miss work entirely each month because of childcare access. And it amounts to about 1.4 billion hours of lost work each year. And if you were to take workers, there's a range here, but workers, even if you were to just figure 1 hour of lost work per week, just 1 hour of lost work per week, that would cost the average household, again, average is a funny thing to consider here because people are all over the board in different parts of the state, but anywhere between $780 and $1,504 in income annually. And again, that is just on the worker side, what they're losing in terms of their paycheck. And but on the business side, of course, there's big impacts not estimated in this report on overall productivity. So we think about worker shortages, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Michigan's demographic challenges and migration patterns and things, but from the childcare standpoint, it adds up. It's not insignificant. This was one of the only reports recently I've seen that really quantifies the impact, again, from the worker point of view. But you could easily kind of look at the other side that not only is the worker losing out on income, the business losing out on productivity.
All right, let's switch gears and talk about the Corporate Transparency Act. Obviously, this is a subject we covered very thoroughly earlier this year, and the fact that we filed a lawsuit against this CTA. So we've had some questions, Brian, and people want to know if there are any updates related to our lawsuit.
Yeah, because those who had businesses that existed before January 1st of this year, before calendar year 2025, have only until the end of this year to do your first filing. So we were hopeful that we would have a decision from the lower court, maybe get a stay for SBAM members at least for before the end of the year. We filed our lawsuit. There were some early motions and briefs that were submitted and responses back and forth between our case and the government. And so we've been in a waiting pattern here for a while, but the judge in Michigan's Western District has scheduled some hearings for December 16th, which really puts the timeline such that I think it makes it unlikely that we're going to get a decision before the end of the year when people would have to comply. So in the next and this is the sort of thing where you don't want to not comply to make a statement or anything. This is not the thing to do that on. So uh, really, as we head toward the end of the year, there's a handful of things that we really want our members to be aware of, double check and make sure they got handled before they go into this new year. This will be one of those things because even though our lawsuit will continue and we are committed to seeing this through, it looks fairly unlikely now that we're going to get a decision before the end of the year when this filing deadline is for most of our members. Remember though, if you started a new business after the first of the year, you only have 90 days to do your first Corporate Transparency Act filing there. We do have, by the way, a partner with an SBAM discount benefit for those who are filing Corporate Transparency Act. If you're not going to do it yourself, or you don't already have a lawyer or somebody who's doing it for you, um, something that you can go through us to get. And we're working on actually expanding more options there too, because and even as we are committed to fighting this in court, we do recommend, highly recommend, insist, in fact, that people not mess around with this one, comply because the penalties are very stiff for willful non-compliance.
Glad you mentioned that service. So if if you're tuned in and you're curious, you can email us at sbam@sbam.org and I'll make sure you have the right link. We're working to set up a webinar that kind of, goes over what the company can do for you as well. So, and while we're waiting for all that to get finalized, just go ahead and email me spam@sbam.org and we'll get you the details. All right, Brian, you mentioned our demographic challenges earlier. The annual census updates have added some insight into migration between states. So what are those most recent updates?
I'm just going to share with you a chart which shows the pluses and minuses from the states that we net have lost the most migration to. So remember that we have think of it in three kind of big categories that we have births minus deaths. So that would be kind of your just the inherent growth or shrinkage among your population. Then you have migration between states, people that moved into Michigan, people that moved out of Michigan. That's the second category. Third category would be international immigration. Now, those first two we have lost on in recent years, and it's only international immigration that made up the difference. We had a little bit of growth last year in Michigan, and we would have shrunk if it wasn't for the international immigration. But the updated census reports that show where people are coming and going from is really kind of more of the same that we see here. And what I liked about what Bridge Michigan did here in laying it out is you're not just seeing the net number, but you see the moves in and out. So, for example, the state of Florida, which is the biggest gainer of Michigan citizens, again, this is where we lose more citizens to than any other state. 26,512 people moved out and to Florida, and then 14,236 moved to Michigan from Florida. So it is a net loss of a little over 12,000. And then that last column here shows the 3-year net loss. So you see 29,000. So if you just kind of do the math, one third, divide 29,000 by a third, you'll see that it's actually an acceleration of the 3-year average in terms of leaving to Florida. I was a little surprised to see Ohio so high on this list, having lost almost 7,000 citizens net to Ohio. So it's not a lot of these are Sun Belt states. You got Texas, Arizona, North Carolina, and Georgia. Then you Arkansas. Then you throw in Kentucky and Tennessee, Nevada for the for to round out that top 10. You see that there's that a lot of these states are warmer states, but Ohio's sitting at number 2. And then the statewide migration totals, total out and total in year by year, you see at the bottom, and you see that the number of people that moved out, 481,000, number of people that moved in, 436,000. So we lost a total of 45 citizens to domestic migration, so movement between states. I didn't go back and look up each year, but a lot of these states, I know Florida in particular has held that number 1 spot for a while in terms of people moving out of Michigan into Florida. And I think those below it have been variations, but I think Ohio being number 2 is a bit of a surprise.
All right, I know you have another graph that you're going to share next, and this is related to the election, which is next week. The Detroit News published this side-by-side comparison of the economic proposals from Harris and Trump. So can you go over some of the highlights here?
Yeah, I think I liked about this article and also the side-by-side comparison is that I think it was a real fair portrayal of the proposals and kind of in the light that the candidates are expressing them. We don't often see that, but as we this side-by-side comparison I thought was pretty good on several issues that would be important to people that are economic actors like business owners in in the economy. So starting with taxes. So on the Harris side, you got more targeted, the earned income tax credit. It says restore and expand. I meant to look up what restore means. I wasn't aware that it had been cut back in any way. But expanding it here, that and the child tax credit, and then the example laid out 6,000 for the first year of a newborn's life. So really leaning into the child tax credit, additional for a newborn, so more family focused. On the Trump side, this something to put on your radar screen that the changes in the tax code that happened in 2017, the first year of Trump's presidency, they are set to expire next year. So they need to be extended by Congress and the president, or changed or modified, or else all that goes away and it reverts back to what it was before, or much of it goes away, it reverts back to what it was before. So Trump's first thing is to renew the 2017 tax cuts, and then looking to and this is not a tax issue, but this category is called household burdens, increasing domestic fuel production or drilling, fracking, that sort of thing, in order to fossil fuels, in order to reduce energy costs overall. On affordable housing, you see very different approaches. On the Harris side, down payment assistance, 25,000 down payment assistance. They believe that would lead to 3 million more homes being built nationwide. On the Trump side, really the housing shortage focusing on regulations, cutting regulations, and then using some federal land surplus, which I hadn't heard that proposal yet, and then banning mortgages for undocumented immigrants. On the Harris side and manufacturing, of course, Michigan's still a heavily industrialized state. It's an incentives versus tariffs approach. So there are very different approaches that the campaigns are putting out there here. We've seen a lot of incentives used in Michigan government, and then also some federal incentives coming recently. So you see that kind of in real time playing out here in the Michigan economy, and targeted towards specific technologies such as batteries, electric vehicles, semiconductors. It's absolutely what you see, the kind of the approach over the last few years here in Michigan. So really the Harris agenda looks very similar to Whitmer's approach to economic development. And the Trump side is the use of tariffs to encourage international businesses. So we talked a lot about free trade. In a lot of cases, we allow tariff-free selling into America, but then our goods face tariffs in other places, and in most of them, almost all other places. But in this, so this approach would be to assess tariffs to move to encourage people to move more in-house, and then to eliminate some of those Biden era regulations, like the CAFE standards. That it's not an electric vehicle mandate, but it kind of acts that way because you can't meet the standards that they put in place with a combustible engine over the long term. And then on trade, both this is one of the areas where there's so few areas where the campaigns agree, but actually in tariffs is one of them. It's just a matter of how wide to go with it. So Trump would go much wider and has even gone so far as to suggest that you could replace or reduce other taxes in favor of a bigger tax on imports. And the Biden administration and now the Harris administration has adopted some favorable stances toward tariffs, but on a more limited use than the Trump campaign. Again, one of the few areas where it's just a degree of difference or degree of usage of tariffs, but not that big a difference between the two on the philosophy of moving toward tariffs, which both parties since the 1990s had really kind of moved away from. It's one of the things where for the consumer, it may very well make things more expensive, at least in the short term for the consumer, but for the producers, for those who work in production, it might lead to more opportunities. So anyway, this is not comprehensive, but I thought a pretty fair representation of the things that I've heard these campaigns talking about when they're speaking for themselves on the campaign trail, as opposed to other people defining them.
All right, and speaking of the election, we had some eye-popping campaign finance reports in September. Who are the major funders of these two campaigns?
Yeah, you got to keep in mind that a lot of the spending these days is not directly from the campaigns. So these outside groups, they form political action committees and they spend money independent of the candidates. So they might be aligned with the candidates, they're trying to help one of the two candidates, but they're independent and they're doing their own thing to help them. That happens outside of the campaign finance reports that we're talking about here, which have also been huge and very impressive compared to previous cycles, just the amount of money that has come in. As you can see, Vice President Harris has raised quite a bit more than former President Trump. Overall, the maybe 3-1, I think. Maybe it's closer to 2-1 now because I think President Trump had been kind of catching up in a little bit lately. But if you were to look at the tech companies right at the top for Harris, you got Google and Microsoft at the number 1 and number 2. And then you go down a little bit, you got Apple, you got Oracle. So very technology company heavy at the top of the food chain in terms of the biggest donors to the campaign. And then on the Trump side, you see American Airlines, Boeing and Lockheed Martin, United Airlines. Those are all, both aerospace and defense type of interest. And then, of course, Walmart being a huge retailer on the list as well. So I thought it was kind of insightful just to look at where some of the biggest contributors toward each of the campaign are coming from. And these are there are a lot of household names. Really, if you go down the list, the tech heavy nature of the Harris contributions really I was a little bit surprised to it because I mentioned the big ones at the top, but really if you keep on going down, it's Netflix, You got Adobe, Amazon, Facebook, Disney. Um, and just the tech nature of the Harris side is a little bit surprising. I don't, it'd be interesting to kind of look up or understand why that industry seems to be kind of lining up on one side, but a um, pretty interesting distinction. While the Trump donors are smaller, kind of across the board, still significant, and some of the tech companies are giving on both sides, but airlines and even General Motors, Home Depot, you see um, Southwest Airlines, you see airlines, defense, and then some retail, some of the major retail that appears on that side of it. There's no real takeaway here other than just kind of the interest, the intrigue. We've seen bigger numbers than we've ever seen, record-setting numbers in terms of total dollars raised. Again, Harris is outraising Trump by a lot. It's not even close, as you can see on this chart. But the race itself is quite close. It's going to be a nail biter, as you can tell by all the attention, the visits from both of these candidates and top level surrogates. I mean, the top surrogates on both sides of the aisle are spending so much time in Michigan. You would think these two are running for governor of Michigan. They've been here so much, but in fact, that's just how important the state of Michigan is to this campaign.
All right, and a reminder too that if you are curious about who the SBAM Small Biz PAC endorsed for Michigan House of Representatives and Supreme Court, you can find that on our website. All right, Brian, I think our next report is Data Monday.
All right, so we got several things just to run through here, but it won't take long. The first is Bridge, Michigan. I thought had a really impactful article. Is talking about the our per capita income in Michigan, and as you can see, the Michigan has been on a downward slide. We used to be just outside of the top 10 in terms of our average per capita income compared to the nation. And we've had a few kind of like comeback areas, in the 90s we were up a bit, and then here comes the that first decade of the 2000s, and then we kind of came back a little bit, kind of struggling to get to improve our ranking among the states, and have really fallen back down now to 39th. So 39th, where our per capita income is about 12% below the US rate. And so we really, even though we have seen income, this doesn't mean that the incomes have fallen here in Michigan. It just means that relative to the rest of the nation, it's not growing as fast. It's one of the reasons why we have to think so much about our economic development strategy. I do have some concerns that just how much is put toward rebuilding an industrial base, that is a big part of our past. It's going to be a big part of our future as well, but it can't just be that. Reliance on the industrial base too much really can, well, let me see, you see where we're at today. A couple other things, wage growth in over the course of this year. Generally we've seen a downward trend to more normalized numbers, but 4.7 still pretty high relative to history. So a lot of business owners are saying, yeah, inflation coming down, but I'm still feeling a lot of upward pressure on overall expenses. And when you see wage growth at this level, it's easy to understand why. And then I'm just showing here the difference between the wage growth of the top 20% and the bottom 20%. There was a time when the highest earning folks were growing wages at a smaller percentage. That's still true today, but it really the gap has closed very substantially. So overall, it's 4.7, but the bottom quintile at 5.1%, the upper at 4.8. So pretty close one to another. Just a couple here on housing as we finish up. And This line that's not completed for the year, that's this year in terms of housing inventory. And normally in previous years, we would have seen through the fall, housing inventory starting to fall. And that is not happening yet. Could be a sign that maybe the housing market is slowing a bit with higher interest rates, or maybe more houses are coming online than we normally see during this time of year, but more likely the latter. And here's a state-by-state color-coded picture of what the housing inventory growth looks like. So how many houses are for sale? And a lot of the markets that used to be really hot, you see more houses for sale today. And Michigan housing inventory up, but pretty, modestly compared to a lot of other places around the country. And that's what we have for today.
All right. Thanks, Brian. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We hope you have a wonderful week and we will be back here next Monday at 3 p.m.
Hey, see you next Monday, everybody.